Okay, good morning. So we're gonna study now the beginning of Parshas Vayeitzei. Not quite the beginning, but towards the beginning. There's a lot that happens in this parsha, where we're introduced to the 12 tribes, among other things. But we get a healthy glimpse into an interesting family dynamic. And here's Yaakov Avinu, who has to run away from his family because his mother orchestrated a ruse where he had to deceive his father, and now his brother wants to kill him. So you have two parents who are probably, not on the best of terms after what happened. You have two sons who now want to kill each other. You have two parents whose sons are both gone. This is like, you can't make up better television than what happens in the Chumash. So we say that quite often. So we're going to look at something we've seen this before, but to see it perhaps for those who will be here this coming Shabbos, actually. So this coming Shabbos, I know a lot of you are not going to be here in Eitz Chaim, but we sometimes what we do is we have what we call a limud Shabbos, where instead of a sermon, we finish davening early. We finish davening early. But we finish davening, and then we all come and sit together and study for a shiur. And this coming week, because we're going to have it in honor and memory of Amy Silverstein's sister, who passed away, and she didn't really have a chance to kind of mourn with the community because she was in Canada. So we're going to talk about her sister, but we're going to focus on the sister relationship, which definitely is prominent in this parsha because you have Rachel and Leah. Now, today we're going to give sort of the, less than glorious view insight into that. Shabbos, because it's Shabbos, it's a memory of a sister. We're going to give the more Pollyannish view. You can imagine for obvious reasons. You don't want to focus on the fact that sisters are fighting and stealing husbands. we don't want to go there right away. So you have to know your crowd. You have to do things at the right time. But here in this crowd, we can handle it. You guys can. We're good. Okay. So we're going to look first at before I share the screen, we're going to look at the Psukim where Yaakov meets Rachel and he gets married, etc., etc. Okay, fine. So let's look at page 148. And Yaakov is there and he runs away. Of course, he's waiting by the well, and they're waiting. People are waiting for something. Now maybe it's some sort of proper manners that they wait until kind of like the chashava comes to water, but everybody's kind of waiting around. They say, where are you from? We're from Haran. He's like, do you know Lavan? And it's like, of course we know. And he's like, is everything good with him? He's good. And I'm like, oh, look, here comes his daughter Rachel. That's always the way it happens in the scripture. Also, is like, oh, they're talking about, look who's coming along. So that's what we would say, like, Chaval Shelo Dibarna Mashiach. Oh, look at it, he happens to be coming. Okay, fine. And they said, look, the day's long. We can't bring the animals in. But we can't, right? We'll water the flock. And while he's speaking, like they have to say, we have to wait. So while he's pasuk tes, that all of a sudden it's like this very dramatic scene. He's talking to them and they're waiting, and they're like, it's like union guys at a construction site. There's like one guy working on like 14 guys advising and telling them what to do, and they're drinking coffee, they're sitting around. Like, we can't do it until the supervisor comes, till the foreman comes. So they're saying all of a sudden, while he's speaking, by the way, this odenu medaber imam, this odenu word, we see a few times here in Bereshit, like while it's taking place, and then the next part of the story kind of comes to fruition. So they're still talking, and then Rachel comes with the thing. Now here he is. This is the pasuk yud. This is like love at first sight. It's kind of like, maybe, is it like when Rivka saw Yitzchak? I don't know. When he sees her, and 3 times in the pasuk it says that she's Lavan achi imo. Okay, he sees her and he rolls off the stone and he waters the thing. Vayishak Yaakov l'Rachel vayisas kalo vayevk. He kisses her and he raises his voice and he cries. Now, we could spend a lot of time trying to figure out what that pasuk means. Why is he kissing her? Why is he crying? Why is he doing it? Like today, if that happened today, he'd be in jail. Vayeged Yaakov l'Rachel ki'achev Yahu v'chi ben Rivka v'teretz v'teged Lavia. And by the way, after you kiss and hug and cry, then you say who you are. Like, it might have made more sense for him to say first, by the way, we happen to be mishpacha and I'm going to marry you, the whole bit. But instead, he tells her afterwards. And again, it's sort of this instinctive gut reaction to seeing her, this reflex of his response to seeing her for the first time. And when they bring him back to Lavan, and when they hear Lavan here's what's going on, and he runs out and he hugs him and he kisses him. Oh, and he tells him everything that's happened. Okay, now we turn the page, and he's like, "Oh, you got to stay with me. You're part of my family." And Pasuk Tezayin on page 150. Ululavan shtei vano shem hagadola Leah shem hakatana Rachel. Now the Torah sets the Torah very deliberately sets us up here. Could have just said he had two daughters, Leah and Rachel. It says he had two daughters. The bigger one, the older one, Gedolah, is Leah, and the younger one is Rachel. And if that's not enough, by the way, to again, just like we saw with Yaakov and Esav and Yitzchak and Yishmael, the Torah wants to set up a dichotomy for you. The Torah wants to set up this didactic where you are forced to pick sides almost, or it's like guiding you to say there's going to be conflict here or something different. And right away, look at the next pasuk, which, kind of, it's almost like a non sequitur also. Ve'enei Leah rakos, v'Rachel haisa yifas Torah v'yifas mareh. So I don't know what the proper way is to describe. Let's say you have, you're trying to marry off two girls. One of them is really, really pretty, and the other one is not. So what do you say? This one is really, really pretty. The other one, wonderful manners, or I don't know. You fill in the blank. But it starts off, first of all, Einei Leah Rakot. What does that mean? How do they translate it here? They were tender. What does that mean? Rach, because rach means soft. So what does it mean, tender? So here's where, again, fourth grade is kicking into your mind, or third grade. Why were they tender? Because she was always crying, Rashi says. Right? So if you look in Rashi says, because she thought Shahaisa Svur Lalos Begorlo Shal Esa Bocha. Shahaya Kolomim Shnei Baron Rivka Shnei Baron Lavan Agdol. Everybody said, oh, her whole life she's being told, you're the older one, you have to marry the older boy, Esav. The younger one gets to marry the younger one. So she knew already she had this destiny that she's supposed to marry Esav. She didn't like her destiny, so she's crying all the time. Nebuch, she's crying. She's a crybaby. I mean, so in other words, I don't think that certainly at first glance, or certainly from a literal point of view, this does not seem like a very flattering description of Leah. And by the way, we're talking about Yisimech Elikim Kisara Rivka Rachav Leah. We're not talking about, I don't know what the female equivalent of Joe Schmo is. That's what we would say if we're talking about guys like Joe Schmo, whatever, but you understand what I'm saying. Okay. So that's that. So, and then the Torah tells us right away, Vayehav Yaakov es Rachel, Vayomer Evadecha Sheva Shanim B'Rachel B'Tzak Kana. He loves Rachel. Oh boy, does he love Rachel. Why does he love Rachel? He loves Rachel. Now, we don't usually find the Yehav until after they're married. Here, all of a sudden he loves her, and he's like, I'm going to work for you for 7 years. That's an interesting proposition. Why would he propose that right away? I don't know. It could be that he thought that maybe this was some sort of penance that he had to serve for his action. Okay. That's a different shiur for a different time. And he's like, okay, better you should stay here than stay with someone else. Stay here, period. So he works for her for 7 years. And again, in like a beautiful love story. Vayavod Yaakov Rachel sheva shanim vayihu beinav ki yamim achadim ba'ahavaso osa. Oh, so beautiful. When you're working for something, like when you're in love, the days bleed into the nights, bleed into the days, and the weeks and the months. Time does not exist. You're lamala min hazman. You're above it, and you could be superhuman, supernatural, right? You remember that Miriam seriously? She's like, you're still in the in the first stages of marriage, which is a beautiful thing. Do you remember when you were dating and like time didn't exist? It's like COVID. It was COVID. So,
It's the best time.
yes. So you didn't have to see, there was nothing to get up for, nothing to go do. Right. So, and then it was like endless bliss. Right. I'm not going to talk about what happens after you get married. Okay. But you still look like you have endless bliss. So you're very good. I saw Benji at school yesterday. He's very, very well liked there, by the way. It was really great. So he's working, and it's like nothing. By the way, just to point out, again, I know I'm bleeding shiurim together, and it's not the greatest thing in the world, but I can't help myself. Going back to the previous parsha, she says, when she says to Yaakov, Rivka says to Yaakov, listen, by the way, I know I set you up here, but you're going to have to leave because your brother wants to kill you. Yeah, that's exactly what you want to hear from your mother. Okay. And she's like, go to my brother Lavan. That's just why he's there. And it says, V'yoshavto imo yamim achadim ad asher tashuv chamas avicha. She says, go there, yamim achadim. And look what happens when he's in love with her. Vayu be'enov ki yamim achadim. There's the penance. In other words, she's like, you have to stay there for X amount of time so in his love for her, he's also serving his term. That's what it means. Kiyamim achadim. Again, that's two different shiurim bleeding together, but you cannot have that lost on you, the similarity of those phrases. Okay, so Yaakov says to Lavan, okay, it's time. Give me my wife. And, I did my time. So, and this is important. Chav beis, vayesof Lavan es kol anshe hamakom vayas mishteh. Lavan, he amasses everybody because he's a big knacker. He's one of these guys. He has to show everything he has to everybody. Okay. And he makes a party. One thing I have come to understand, look, Aline, you're making a wedding next week, and it's like a lot of stress, right? There's no stress, right? It's a piece of cake. There's no stress at all. One of the things I've noticed is a couple of things, and this is going to be in eternity because it's going to be on the internet. So it's going to live forever. One of the things I've noticed is that today, the kids control the parents when it comes to weddings, which to my mind is like Michigan. Okay, whatever. But another thing is that one thing I've come to appreciate during COVID is the value of a small, intimate wedding. There's something beautiful about a small. Now I know we have communities and constraints, and like in my life, I'll never be able to get away with making a small wedding. Halavai. Like I don't think so. But I did a wedding. It's a great story. This is a great story. So it was actually right before COVID. Family we're very, very close with, and the daughter's getting married, and they wanted me to do the wedding. There was one small problem, small problem, is that it was a September wedding, like a week after Labor Day, and the service is going to take place at 6 p.m. on Saturday. So you do the math, and you realize why my presence was precluded from taking place. It couldn't happen. Okay, and they understood that. They get, that's not an observant family, whatever. Not to mention, also said the wedding wasn't kosher, and okay, I can't. So they hired some rabbi that they don't know, and 4 days before the wedding or something, or a week before the wedding, the rabbi lets them know. He says, by the way, I can't make the service. Why? Because in his temple, which is like nothing going on ever, for some reason, they were able to secure the cast of Shtisel for a talk, and they got 1,100 people signed up to go. This is like the height of Shtisel. And he's like, yeah, I'm sorry, your wedding is second because I've got 1,100 people come to the synagogue. Fine. So I said, look, I have an idea. Why don't we do a private ceremony on Thursday evening in your apartment? We'll make sure that we have proper witnesses, kosher food, a minyan, the whole bit. And we did that. And actually, I was on my way to Long Island for another thing. It was in the city, and some of my kids with me. And my kids turned to me, they said, I want that. It was the most beautiful, meaningful thing because it was only the people that you really wanted there. I know that sounds horrible to say that because you want everybody at your wedding, but you know what I mean. And then COVID came, and all of her friends were getting married. They kept pushing off weddings. She's like, no, don't push it off. I'm telling you, do a small ceremony. I did. It's great. So now, we had a wedding last week, and it was, I don't know, maybe 150 people. It's manageable. It's beautiful. And not to mention, he could save a lot of money. But that's not the main factor. I'm just saying, but like, sometimes things get so big. So Lavan makes a huge, huge, huge wedding because he wants everybody to see, but we're going to see there's a motivation for this. And Vayihi ba'erev, vayikaches Leah bito, vayavei oso elav, vayavo eleh. And it was at night. What happened? He took Leah, his daughter, okay? And he, of course, we know the story. And he switched. And of course, he gave Zilpah also. I don't know why that's important right here. It's not relevant right now. And then in the morning, Chafei, Vayihi, Baboker, Vihine hi Leah, Vayomer Elavan, Mazos asisa li, halo barachel avarati imach, valoma rimisat. In the morning, he woke up, Yaakov did, and Yaakov is so passive here also. Like you'll see a lot of things happen to Yaakov, even though he's very active in a lot of ways, but when it comes to his family, he's bounced around like a ping pong ball, like in a pinball machine. No, tonight you sleep here, tonight you sleep there. I traded this, I got that. Bah, bah, bah. Oh, by the way, Yaakov, I named all the kids. Thanks for showing up. It was really nice of you to come to the bris. He didn't even come. I don't know. Anyway, so in the morning it's Leah, and he says to Lavan, what did you do to me? I worked for Rachel. Why did you deceive me? And then Lavan says, the next page, 152, Vayomer Lavan, Lo yeyasa kemim kamenu laseis hatziira lefnei habechira. It is not the way we do it in our place to put the tzira in front of the bechira. Okay, now, there's a lot to talk about here. And I'll ask you the question. I know we've discussed this in the past, but it's worth revisiting. Who are the guilty parties here? I mean, there's no question that Lavan is set up as a bad guy. Arami Oved Avi. The whole crux of the Magid Pesach story starts with Lavan. Lavan bad, Yaakov good. Okay. But when Yaakov wakes up in the morning and he realizes now how that happened, we're going to see in the Gemara how that happened. Lavan, he wakes up in the morning, Yaakov does, and he sees that, oh, yeah, not Rachel. Okay, maybe next year we'll get better lighting in the tent so that, like, at least before we go, retire, we'll see who's who. Okay, that. And by the way, don't fall for the myth that people think, oh, the reason why we do Badekin, by the way, is to see if that's not true. It's not based on this whatsoever. It has to do with Yitzchak and Rivka. It says that she covered her with the thing. It has nothing to do because, I mean, come on, like that's going to tell you something, like who she is because you picked up the veil. There are 8 million ways you can get fooled. Oh, by the way, and also today, our days, like our veils, if you go to a Hasidic wedding or very, very frum community weddings, the deck ticha that they use, it's like a steel cage, that was the biggest one, not the big. It was one of the disagreements that took place before our nuptials took place roughly 26 years ago. My wife didn't understand why I didn't want her to wear the executioner veil. I said, I would like to see you under the chuppah, but everybody else does that. I'm like, yeah, but the collars, they walk around like this. They're like, that's why the parents hold the bride, because she can't see where she's going. Okay, that's why they do that. But anyway, I digress. He wakes up and it says, Vayomer el Lavan. Maybe it should say Vayomer el Leah. How complicit is she in this ruse?
I think they both are. Both women are.
Yeah. Both who?
Both women. Rachel is also complicit.
Oh, Rachel. We don't see that he gets upset at Leah. We don't see that he gets upset at Rachel, certainly, and even in the Midrashic content, which we will examine shortly, it's pretty interesting, right? It's pretty interesting that who's like Yaakov's like, wait, does anybody tell the truth here? Nothing is right here. The father-in-law tricked me. All right, we already expected that.
Look, he saw it with his mother. He sees all these women; they're just doing things all the time.
Right. So don't you think he should have just like hightailed it out of there and say nothing good could come of this? Or maybe he was so in love. Is that also what happens? That maybe when you're so in love, and by the way, it uses the word love with Yaakov a lot. He loves Rachel. It says that again later, he loves her. And that so much so that, the Raka and pretty, the crybaby versus gorgeous, that's born out later when it says that loved versus Sinu'ah, which we see later on when the kids are born. So snua, I know the PC way of writing it is unloved. Snua does not mean unloved. Snua means, I know the Mefarshim say that it means unloved, but let's be honest, snua means hated, despised. She felt despised. So this further split between the two sisters. And then later on with Yosef, it says that he loves Yosef more than the other kids. So yeah, Jacob is a lover. He's a lover, not a fighter, right? So Jacob, maybe when you're so in love, you're willing to overlook the indiscretions of your beloved because, your feelings of love overpower your feelings of contempt that you may have for this despicable act, right? Okay, maybe so. But what about Leah? So let's look at some of the portions. I'm going to share the screen here.
Can it be that he knew he tricked?
Hold on, Gail, for a second. Alina's just saying something.
If you think that his mother was responsible for his deceit of his father, and if he blames her, then you blame the parent who caused it.
Okay, so you're saying you blame the source.
If in his life he blames the source, then in their life he can blame the source.
Okay. That's fair enough. What do you want to say, Gail?
I mean, he fooled his father in order to get the blessing because it was determined that his brother was unworthy. Maybe he felt some type of kinship to Leah, not to blame her because her destiny would have been to marry Esav if this deceit didn't happen. And he can appreciate why she would not be motivated to do so.
Okay, I like that. I like what you're saying. And by the way, this will be borne out in the Mefarshim, but they have a much stronger kind of take on this. So let's see what the Ramban says. So that's the first thing on the page here. I have it on the screen here if you want in English. And the Eternal saw that Leah was hated. Okay, this is coming on to the Psukim later. Okay, look. Now Leah had deceived her sister and also Jacob. For even if you were to say that she showed respect for her father, who took her and brought her into him, and she was not rebellious against him, she should have by word or sign indicated that she was Leah. All the more is this so since she feigned herself all night to be another, which was the reason why Jacob did not recognize her until he saw her in the morning. Now, part of the difficulty with this Ramban, I think, when it says that she deceived her sister, the sister was part of it also. The sister gave, we'll see the Gemara, this is the sister gave the signs. I know the Ramban knows this Gemara, so it's hard to understand what the Ramban is saying. I understand deceive the husband, and I understand pretend to be someone else, but she didn't really deceive her sister. They were both in on it together. She couldn't have done it without her sister. How did she know to pretend her sister? So unless the Ramban is not holding, so to speak, of this Gemara. Okay, let's continue. So it was for this reason that Jacob hated her. But God, knowing that she did so in order to be married to the righteous one. See, sounds like Gail here. Gail, you should say, so you have to say, repeat after me, say, Baruch Shekivanti. Say that.
Baruch Shekivanti.
Which means that, when you have that, when you have in mind what one of the great rabbis say in the commentaries, you say, Baruch Shekivanti, it's a bracha, it's a blessing upon your house. So God, knowing that she did so in order to be married to the righteous one, had compassion upon her. So the rabbi said in Medrash, when Jacob saw the deeds by which Leah had deceived her sister, he decided to divorce her. But when Hashem remembered her by giving her children, Jacob said, what, I'm going to divorce the mother of these children? That's the meaning of the expression, and the Eternal saw. He had compassion upon her so that Jacob should not leave her. But there are some scholars who say that in the case of two wives, one of whom was loved exceedingly, the second one, who was the less beloved, is called hated relative to the first, just as scripture said, and he loved Rachel more than Leah. But not that he hated her. Leah was, however, ashamed of the matter, and so God saw her affliction. So the Ramban says that she's definitely part of this. She's definitely part of the deceit. However, she's not necessarily held culpable for it because there is an extenuating circumstance or there is a reasonable explanation. And here's where you can get into, and this is a wonderful, wonderful discussion to have at the Shabbos table, because we have many models of this from last week's Parsha, this week's Parsha, where we could say, and can you argue, do the ends justify the means? And we could give a number of examples where, let's say for the sake of shalom bayis, for the sake of peace in the home, you're allowed to lie. We'll come back to that in a minute. Look at the Dasakena Balitos is the next thing here. This is great. Let me see if I can blow it up here. Okay. Dasakena, again, this comes from the Middle Ages. This is a commentary found in Menich Hamashim. Vahiba Boker. Shekol halayla haisa osa atzma kerachel mitoch shlosha simanu shemasula. In other words, you can ask yourself the practical question: how do you pretend to be someone else? How? Not so easy. Okay, you'll say it's dark, they couldn't see each other. Maybe they had very similar appearances, but there has to be, you could tell people apart. I mean, parents of twins don't often get fooled by their kids who are twins. Again, I don't have twins in my family, but I just, just from what I hear. Anyway, there were 3 signs given over Nida, Chala, Hadlaka, Saner, which we say in Bama Malikin. In other words, but they had some sort of code system worked out. We'll see in the Gemara. Kamosha Mosan Yaakov Rachel, right? The Gemara, he quotes the Gemara Megillah. Medrash, Kol Halayla. This is great. I love this. This, if anybody here wants to like a great source for something that this might possibly be, we've talked about this in the past. Kol Halayla Haya Mishorin Osan Akruin. Halaya. Everyone who was at the party, they were like singing, Mishorin, and they were saying Halaya. They were saying it's Leah, which some have suggested that this is the source in Sephardic custom at Simchas to start going as if to say Leah. Halaya. It's Leah. Doofus, dude, check it out. It's not who you think it is. I don't mean to call Yaakov Avinu doofus. I'm just, colloquializing it in my silly way. Okay. Ulamachar kashara'a shehileya amar bevadai zeu shahi mishar halaya. He says now the next day when he realizes it's Leah, he's like, right? I could have had a V8. He's like, I should have realized that's what they were saying, that it's Leah, Shahayim Ramzan, that that's what they were intimate, that's what they were hinting at. Va'armalah, this is great because there's nothing like the great smackdown when you think you're in the right and then someone gives it right back to you. And not only do you realize you're not in the right, you realize that you're more wrong than you thought that they were wrong. So look at this. And this is also what Gail was saying. Va'armalah, Rami Yosef bas Ramai, Balayla karasi lach Rachel v'anisali, Hashta karina laleya v'anisali. And she says, and this is based on the Medrash, this is great. We have other versions of the Medrash of this. He says to her, Leah, you're a deceiver, the daughter of a deceiver. You're such a deceiving, conniving, fill in the blanks. All right, whatever you want to use to describe her. At night, I called you Rachel, and you said you are Rachel. Now in the morning, I call you Leah, you say you're Leah. What's going on here? So the best way, of course, that Jews do things is we answer questions with questions. Amrale, Gvar de Lesle Talmudai, Avuch Karilach Esav Anas Vanisale, Karilach Yaakov Vanisale. She's like, wait a minute. You don't think I have the greatest Rebbe in this discipline ever? Do you remember someone whose father called him Esav and he said, yes, I'm Esav. And then he called him Yaakov and he said, yeah, I'm Yaakov. Kolomar. She's like, where did I learn it from? I learned it from you. You remember that great commercial? There used to be a great commercial when it was like, in the beginning of the stages when you could like first address the fact that there is a problem of drug abuse in the world. Now it's like, yeah, every day, like, what do you want? And there was a commercial about, it was like one of these PSA commercials, and the father busts in on the kid and he's like holding his paraphernalia. He's like, where'd you get this? Where'd you learn this from? And the kid's like, I learned it from you, Dad. I learned it from you. If you remember that commercial, look it up. It's got to be on YouTube. It's great. It's classic. So we've turned it there. I learned it from you. So he's like, I learned it from you. So why does he hate her? He doesn't hate her because she's not Rachel. He hates her because she put him in his place. Nobody likes that, by the way. I'm going to tell you that, right? Whatever it is, here the Mefarshim are saying quite clearly that she had an active role in this deceit. Look at Rav Hirsch. Rav Hirsch on the next page. Rav Hirsch says he loved Leah and didn't make her pay for her father's behavior for the way she had become his wife. We can deduce that Leah too was taken in by her father by some sort of a legal arrangement he had made with Jacob as to agreed customs, and she was not a party to any willful deception. By the way, you'll see Rav Hirsch in this whole story, and we'll see it more on Shabbos. He has a much more Pollyannish view kind of this deceit. Yes, she was involved. There's no question that she was involved, but she might have been duped into being involved. In other words, she thought, oh, I'm just doing what I was told. Oh, my father told me, which by the way is not such a stretch. That's actually a lot more plausible because in that society, the women don't have a lot of say. The exception we saw was last week when they asked Rivka, "Oh, do you want to go? What do you think? You want to go with this guy?" She's like, "Yeah, I'm out of here." Okay, but we don't find so often that the women are consulted necessarily for their rights. Now, a lot has changed. We have a long way to go. A lot has changed, certainly since the biblical time. So Rav Hirsch says, like, okay, I get it. Like, you know what? She had a part in it, but she unwittingly was a part of the ruse.
That almost makes Rachel look worse. Like, okay, Leah was duped. He told her, listen, this is the agreement. You're supposed to go first. What did he tell Rachel?
Exactly.
That's also some kind of thing?
At least a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions here. Like, you know, so who's exactly what's going on? Now, let's look at the Gemara and Megillah.
Can I disagree about women exerting themselves so far? Sarah got rid of Hagar. That was her. Rivka deceived Isaac. I don't know. I think women seem pretty strong here.
They seem strong, but they didn't have a say, let's say, in familiar manners, like outright, meaning like in terms of who finds Yitzchak the wife. Abraham takes care of it. I mean, I understand his mother was dead, but in other words, we don't find the active role. Now, by the way, if you look at it carefully, and you're 100% correct, is that who's really calling the shots is no question is the women here. Now that gets kind of lost because we have this sort of male-dominated society, but there's no question about it. Yeah, so it's not a disagreement. It's just kind of like on a different track. In society, like it's Lavan. By the way, notice like there's no mention of Lavan's wife or anything. Now I know we have a medrash that she died. I don't know, whatever. I don't know, who knows what. But there's no. It's all Lavan. There's no like Mrs. Lavan here. Who is Mrs.? I don't know. Okay, so look at the Gemara says. The Gemara says this is on the last page. The last 2 pages of the handout. I just took it from the Enyach of English. It's very nice, nice Gemara. What's the meaning of the verse? He doesn't withdraw his eyes from the righteous. God doesn't ignore the deeds of the righteous. He rewards the measure for measure, even many generations later. Okay, so we have this beautiful, the Gemara discussing the beautiful rewards that happens generations later. The Gemara here is talking about Esther. But we get into these conversations. As a reward for the modesty that was displayed by Rachel, she merited that the modest soul descended from her. And soul, etc., etc. So what was the modesty of Rachel? Because it says Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother. Was he then her father's brother? Was he not, in fact, the son of Rebecca, her father's sister? In other words, he wasn't actually, he was his uncle. So why did he say it's her father's brother? So this is what he said. Only Gemara could speak this way. He's like, Rachel, will you marry me? She says, again, I'm really paraphrasing of the Gemara. Will you marry me? She's like, yeah, but you should know that, you know, my father's not a good guy. He's a swindler, and you probably will not be able to outfox him. And Jacob said, if he's a swindler, I am his brother in swindling. Oh, I knew Jack Kennedy. You're no Jack Kennedy, right? So he's like, yeah. By the way, when he said he's her father's brother, he's like, Ray, Rack, whatever he called her, Racheli, whatever, you know, I have one of these. That's why I'm thinking of all the nicknames that we call my daughter. I got you. He's like, I got this. I can hold my own. I'm pretty good at being a shyster myself. So then she says, is a righteous person permitted to engage in trickery? And he says, yes, because it says with a pure person, you act in purity, and with a corrupt person, you act perversely. Kind of know your audience, deal in the language with which they are familiar. So he says, what trick does he have up his sleeve? She says, well, I have an older sister, Leah, and my father will not let me get married before he marries her off. He will surely try to switch her for me. So in other words, they're contending for this the whole time. They both know this is a possibility, a very real possibility, of course, which Rachel, who knows her father, says, look, this is going to happen. So they gave her signs through which she could identify herself to him. When the wedding night came and Rachel realized that her father was about to substitute Leah for her. Now, like, where was Rachel during the wedding? Like, what did they do with her? Did they lock her in a box or something? Did they send her on an errand? Like, what did she get a phone call and then like she had to go in the room and she's locked in the closet? Like, it's there's a lot to think about here. But the Gemara here is talking about Rachel Imenu. When the wedding night came and he realized that the substitute was going to take place, she says, my sister will be humiliated, for she will not have the signs Jacob gave me to identify herself. So right away, she gave Leah the signs that Yaakov had given her. And that's why it says in the morning, Vehine Leah, Uva Boker, right? Vehi Boker, Vehine He Leah. In the morning, Jacob discovered, oh, it was Leah. And we infer from this that until that morning, she was not Leah? No, of course not. Rather, because the signs that Rachel had given to Leah, Jacob didn't know until the morning that it was Leah and not Rachel. So therefore, she was rewarded that the modest soul descended from her. Now it's going to go on and discuss what was the modesty. Anyway, it's a lovely Gemara, and we're going to put a very positive spin on this on Shabbos. But in other words, both Rachel and both Leah are involved in this deceit. Different reasons. Now, Rachel here has a very altruistic motivation here, love of a sister, not wanting to see a sister be embarrassed. I think that's quite admirable. I think that's something we can definitely think about. But then you ask yourself the question is like, still, why didn't somebody say something? Why wouldn't she? Why wouldn't Leah say something when she was alone with Yaakov, saying, by the way, this is what's going on? Now, could be she doesn't want to be embarrassed. She's Rakos. Now, but they were both certainly willing participants. Now, one more piece here that we're going to look at before we kind of have a little discussion is this medrash. Look, I have these two midrashim here. The one on the bottom where it says Torah Shabbal Peh, this is from the Torah Shalema. Similar to what we saw. Kol halayla haisa osa atzma kerachel. Kivan she'amad baboker v'hinei Leah. When you woke up and he sees that it's Leah. Amalo bas Ramai lama risa. He says like daughter of this, similar to what the Das Kanim quoted. You daughter of a deceiver. Why'd you trick me? Amalo v'atal lama risa avicha. And she says this is a little bit stronger, saying like, so what? Wait, you asked me why did I deceive you? Why'd you deceive your father? When you said, are you Esav? And you said, Anochi echse b'charecha. And you're telling V'ata Omer Lama Rivisani? Vavicha lo Omer Ba'achipa B'ma? Wait a minute. You're asking me why I deceived? You, the deceiver, Yaakov? Okay, and then it says that's why he started to hate her. The other Medrash Rabbah, it's a lot of, and it discusses here why he brought the whole town in, so that nobody could sort of object to it, and he couldn't make a scene. But he says, but what happens here clearly is the comparison. The Medrash is making a comparison for us between the story of these two siblings, Rachel and Leah, and Yaakov and Esav. Okay, so let's fire them off. What are the similarities between the two stories? Okay, so I mean, the obvious is where one sibling pretends to be the other sibling, which is pretty,
It's also the parent. It's not the sibling necessarily doing it by their own fruition. It's the parent kind of forcing it on them.
Exactly. Miriam says beautifully that the deception is actually initiated or even instigated by one of the parents. Now, in one, it was one against the other. Here is this one against the other non-existent. In other words, but the parents are very involved in this deception that's taking place. Okay. This is where we get into the difficult sort of moral issue of do the ends justify the means? But in both of these cases, it seems that we needed to get to a certain result by hook or by crook, as they say. And the deception was necessary to get us to that end result, even though a tremendous amount of suffering and pain was caused. Also, it's not like we had a lot of time to make this decision. This is something that had to happen right away. The father said, he calls the son and I want some food. And like quickly Rivka has to act. Now, who knows how long she was hatching this plan, whether that was going to happen. She didn't know, oh, today's the day he's going to give the blessing. While he's out hunting, quick, let me go get it, right? She says, Maher, quick, hurry up. Bitsuda litzai, the whole bit. And here also, it's a wedding night. It's not like, okay, he says Malesh was, I was like, I'm sorry, I did my time. Havali ishti. And all of a sudden, okay, quick, now he has to act. Okay. The victim in both cases was someone who was tricked. Why? Because he had a distinct inability to see what was to see physically, to see what was going on. Now you could say see literally or see figuratively. And again, the only way to accomplish this goal was through deception. What's interesting also, what ties these two together, I think it's really, really, really important when you have to see it in the Psukim, is that what is when Lavan, he says to Lavan, he doesn't, this explains why, because Yaakov understands exactly what's going on here. It's not the daughters, It's the parent who instigated this, and he goes straight to the source, to Lavan. Why did you deceive me? And Lavan says, again, read Pasuk Chavav, page 152, and let me paraphrase the pasuk. He says, "Lo yasakim kamen lo setzuvim bechira." I don't know how they do things where you come from, Sonny boy, but over here we don't put the younger one ahead of the older one. Okay, and notice how he has no response to that. Yaakov could have just said, what do you mean? You promised, you guaranteed, da, 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 da. And all of a sudden, he's so willingly is willing to work he ends up 20 years, another 7 years, another, right? He's willing to do that off the bat without a negotiation, without anything. It's so like un-Jewish, like handle a little bit, right? But nothing. Why? Because he realized that he has him dead to rights. He gives him such strong musar. That's what the Medrash is saying. Wait, he said it to Leah, and since Leah said it to him, when he goes to Lavan's saying exactly the same thing. And by the way, he says, "Laseis hatzeira." Okay, remember the prophecy that Rivka was given when the babies were struggling? It said, "V'rav ya'avod sa'ir." The same exact word, "V'rav ya'avod sa'ir." Now, how you read that pasuk? Does it mean "V'rav kama ya'avod sa'ir" or "V'rav ya'avod sa'ir"? That's a whole machlokas among the diktuk mefarshim, so to speak. Now, we understand that the bracha had to get to Yaakov, and therefore it had to take place. Why did it have to go this way? Why the deception? Let's say if we macro, big vision, what had to happen that Leah had to get involved in this? So I think it's pretty clear if we look at what immediately follows. What immediately follows their wedding? They're both weddings, really. Is that, he says, "Why'd you trick me?" And he's like, "Okay, work for me another 7 years." And then he marries Rachel, and then it says he loves Rachel, and Hashem sees that she was Sinua, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then what happens? In the end of this chapter, starting from chapter Pasuk 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, what happens in the span of 5 psukim? Boom, 4 kids, right? By the way, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. In other words, the bulk of the tribes, 6 of the tribes, that's half, 50% of the tribes come from Leah, Imenu. The rest is 2, 2, 2, as we know. Okay, so and that's what the Medrash also intimated, saying like why he didn't want to divorce her. He's like, oh my God, she has all these kids, meaning, he's realizing that maybe part of this divine covenantal plan is that a lot of the shvatim have to come from Leah. Okay, when she gives him musar, when Leah gives him musar. Now, if you say that this is Leah, the willing and witting part, that she knows what she's doing, she's not just saying like to shtach him, to give him musar, to say, you shouldn't be asking me questions, you know better. She was saying to him, you should be able to relate on a different level to what I had to do because of the greater good, or because of the cause, or because of the covenantal promise, whatever word you want to fill in. But in other words, you know that you had to be a part of this because there was certain destiny that had to be met. And if this was the only way that it could be met, so be it. Same for me. I had to do what I had to do. I had to be involved, even though it's not pretty, but look at the result. And so the result is, by the way, so I'm guessing that the divine blessing is ultimately upon them, because we do have 12 tribes of Israel, right? And 12 tribes of Israel, would you say, it's tainted, right? They would never be able to run for office today, because we would dig up their past, we would cancel them in 2 seconds and be like, oh, no, she can't. She deceived her husband. There's no way she could be running an office. Or maybe that's more of a reason they should be running an office. I don't know. But my point is that we see that we have the Shiftei Ka, the 12 tribes of Israel, which ultimately come from here. So,
Can I say something? But you're kind of working in reverse. We couldn't we have had a Israel with a big population without 12 tribes, or 12 tribes coming from other people, not Leah? Like we're going
apparently
back.
not. Yeah, you can ask that question, but I guess we'll never know. But it seems, I mean, and that seems to be that's exactly the crux of this conversation. The fact that it ended up this way, is it sort of like, well, it ended up this way and we're just going to live with it and move on? Or did it end up this way because this is how it was supposed to end up? And you'll see that nuance in the Mefarshim. When you read it in the Mefarshim, many of the Mefarshim say, no, we had to get to this point. Which again, it leads you to great moral conundrum. There's a tremendous, what do you mean? We had to get to this point, and sometimes we had to cut some corners, or we had to do things that were not pretty, or we had to do, I don't know, at what point does the greater good outweigh sort of morality or ethics? I don't know, again, leave these for the experts, but it seems that, and what many of the Mefarshim are saying is that, yeah, we had to get to this greater good. And that's exactly the parallel between the chapter with Yitzchak, with Yaakov and Esav deceiving Yitzchak, and with Leah and Rachel deceiving Yaakov. It's not sort of not every decision in the world has the clearest choices. Sometimes, if you wait, and by the way, you could apply this to anything in life, is you're waiting for the perfect solution. It's just not going to come. They talk about the guy that was waiting, he was dating, he was waiting to meet the perfect girl. He finally met her. The only problem is that she was looking for the perfect guy. Okay. So the enemy of good is better. My Rebbe always used to tell us, right? So sometimes you have to settle for good or good enough. Now that's hard.
Perfect solutions came with costs. None of these people were particularly happy.
Tremendous cost, that's the whole thing. And in both cases, that's the similarity, that, Yaakov and Yitzchak and Rivka, their relationship has to be strained forever. The relationship between parents and children there, strained forever. Now look at Yaakov and his wives, and Yaakov and his children, and the children now later in the parsha getting involved in the parents' business. This is not like fairy tale hunky-dory, everybody lives happily ever after. But covenantal business is ugly sometimes. That's what's, family is ugly sometimes. I know it's very difficult for anybody here to relate to that. Family stuff is just really ugly sometimes. That's just how it is. The question is what are you going to do about it? So you're going to come Shabbos, everything's beautiful, it's pretty, and sisters love each other. I'm giving you kind of the underbelly of it, but it's worth looking at how these reactions took place, and like kind of when you see it, when you read it, when you understand this, you read it in the Pesukim, you hear like Yaakov asks an indignant question, and he gets some sort of answer, and then he doesn't follow up on it. There's a reason why, because he was put in his place, and maybe he was made to understand like, oh, I see. And that's why he's like, okay, I'll work for the other one. It doesn't change his relationship between like sort of Rachel and Leah or whatever, but really interesting dynamic. And this is the foundation of the tribes of Israel. It's founded in sort of strife. It's founded in complicated moral, ethical paths that are taken, while at the same time leading us to this final result. So, the sagas continue, God willing. This is some good stuff. What makes our lives look kind of simple, hopefully after this. And, like I say all the time, Days of Our Lives has nothing on us, nothing on our Bible. We have the best stuff here. So everybody have a wonderful day, and I'll see you, God willing, next time.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye.
My colleague always uses that